BetMGM is the king of online casinos. Enjoy Las Vegas excitement at your fingertips. Play popular live games like blackjack, baccarat, and roulette. Leap into a world filled with slots, live dealers, popular table games, and much more. Download the app today and see for yourself why BetMGM is the king of casinos. Please play responsibly.
A dream is a wish your heart made.
Step aboard a Disney cruise and discover where memories meet adventure, where escape meets imagination, where magic meets the sea. Disney Cruise Line.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to hour 2 of tonight's show here in the X Zone, and we're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, on Classic 1220 and streaming around the world on classic1220.ca. My guest this hour, X Zone Nation, is Sika Groves, and we're going to be talking about battlefield archaeology, Victorian era's New Age and occult, the paranormal, ghost spirits, and things that go bump in the night, as well as psychic abilities. Joining me now is Sika Groves. And Sika, welcome to the X Zone.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. There's lots of things to talk about.
Oh my goodness, there certainly are. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the paranormal.
Well, I'm one of those people that was just born that way. I really have no explanation as to, how I got into it. It's just always been a part of my life. It's not something that I just woke up one day and went, oh, wow. I started, even when I was a little child, very small, I used to think, I used to see things, I used to hear things. I would, go to my mom's bedroom and she would say, go back to bed, you're having a dream or a nightmare. And those kinds of experiences, which a lot of children do have. And I think as adults or non-believers, we tend to just, send kids back to their beds thinking that they're, imagining these things or having bad dreams. But it just started that way. It wasn't that it was necessarily bad dreams. It was just things that were, appearing to me that I couldn't make sense of at the time. And it just continued and it changed over the years. And I find that it does sort of ebb and flow and it changes. And the way that I perceive things and the way that I receive things have changed over the years. And I mean, I'm, much, much older now. And I have a much better handle on how I receive and perceive. So I can sort of weed out the chaff from the, from the garbage. And I can have a much better handle on understanding what I do. But for me, it's just always been in my life. I've had people ask me, what's it like to not have the ability? And my answer is I don't know, because I've only ever had it. So I can't answer those kinds of questions.
What do you think your strongest ability is?
Oh, goodness. See, that's the thing. I don't really separate anything out.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just everything. I see things, but when I say I see things, it's never like a physical apparition. So when people say, oh, I've seen a ghost, I can honestly say that I have not seen an apparition in that way. They come to me in a peripheral viewpoint or in my mind's eye, and I can describe them very vividly, but it isn't as if it's just manifesting right in front of me.
So what is your attitude towards the paranormal and scientifically unexplained phenomenon?
Well, here's the catch-22 with that one.
Okay.
I'm actually a scientist. I have a Bachelor of Science, and I have a degree in archaeology. So it's an interesting conundrum to be a person of science and yet have this, this ability, if you like, that is not really understood or accepted by traditional science, yet it definitely fits into the realm of certain aspects of energy and quantum physics and all of those kinds of things. So I use it to my advantage. I have to say the abilities that I do have, I have been able to use in the workplace. I don't necessarily blurt things out to my colleagues because some people aren't quite as understanding. But I do use what I receive on a archaeological site. It's sort of, I don't want to say secondhand information for me, but I do use it because I trust what I'm receiving.
Now,
it does. I was just going to say it does become part of what I do.
Now, when you're out doing archaeology and you go to, let's say, a battlefield archaeological dig,
right?
Do you find that the spirits or the ghosts or those who have departed physically know that you're able to communicate and they kind of, gather towards you?
I've had a couple of very interesting instances happen to me. And again, this is a whole kind of expanded viewpoint. For me, I really believe that spirits or energy interact on that level, that field of energy. So as we are all, made up of energy, everything in this world, in this universe has an energetic signature or pattern. I believe that those spirits or those, energy signatures that have passed on, if they're vibrating at the same level as I am, I think we're able to interact on that frequency. So much like a radio, the frequency of the radio.
Right.
It's almost that same idea. There's a lot of times where I like to work with other mediums, and when I do any kind of paranormal investigations. But in the sense of with my work, I do believe that there are certain spirits or entities that can communicate with me, and then there's ones that I may never pick up on. I really believe that as somebody who has this ability, and I'm going to go out there and say this, is that we have the ability to interact with only a very small portion of spirits that are, residing around us. And that is because we vibrate at a level that interacts with only certain spirits. So if somebody tells me that they can pick up on everything, I don't believe them. It's a flag for me as somebody who's been doing this for most of my life, all of my life, but most of my cognitive life, that I don't do that. But yes, in terms of experiences, I have had them. I have had spirits actually come and speak to me and give me information that I otherwise would never have known, or we would not have known. And then we are able to, or I am able to, do a little more digging and find out truth. And I had one experience, which was not actually on an archaeological dig, but I was on a site down in New Orleans, Chalmette Battlefield, which is the War of 1812, the Battle of New Orleans. And it just happened to be a quiet day, and I was there with my husband, and we were there with a friend, and we had walked through the cemetery that sits next door. It is a military cemetery that has people interred from the War of 1812 right up until the Second World War, and even, I believe, Korean War, and possibly some Vietnam in there as well. But it's a national cemetery. And we were just walking through that, and we happened to walk through down the end onto Chalmette Battlefield. And my husband and our friends sat down on the bench under this beautiful big live oak. And I proceeded to walk out to the platform, which is on the field. And there's a number of plaques out there, and I wanted to look at those, but I was also really interested in the crawfish castles, because there were these fantastic crawfish castles out in the middle of the field. They were about 2 feet tall, and these crawfish build their little mud castles out there. And when I was coming back, and I'd done my thing, and I walked back towards them, everything suddenly changed for me, and I was in the middle of a battle. It was nighttime. I could smell the gunpowder. I could see the flashes. I could see cannon fire coming off of the river. And suddenly these 2 boys come running past me, and one of them grabs my hand and says, essentially tells me, we've got to get out of here. But he's got this, English accent, and he's like, run, run, run. And he grabs my hand, and we start running. And, all of this chaos is going on, and I'm no longer in the sunny afternoon of Chalmette. I'm now in this, dark nighttime scenario. And apparently my husband and our friend had to chase me as I had run all the way back into the cemetery.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was crying, and it was very, very dramatic and very emotional and so I don't know how to explain what happened with that. It was almost like I had stepped into a sort of time loop of some sort, or it was just that those spirits and that energy was so strong in that moment that, it was able to take me on this adventure. It was it was very different, but I've had that happen numerous times in different locations for different reasons. And so, can I apply that to my work? Well, yes, in some ways, but it's very hard to explain to people where this information is coming from. So sometimes I have to
suppress it.
Get a little creative.
As a member of the scientific community yourself, why is it that other members of the scientific community, a great more number of the scientific community, get involved and investigate the paranormal to help better understand what we're dealing with?
I think that, in sort of the honesty of answering that, it's difficult to pinpoint, who might do that. But I do have a number of friends in the science area that are interested. And for the most part, they are people that work in physics and quantum physics.
Yes.
And they're very interested in that dynamic of energy, the energy exchange, what happens to someone like myself when I interact with, other spirits or other energy that's out there. And it's an interesting sort of game in a way, because it's again one of those things where while we can gauge energy interactions, we understand, as I said prior, there's energetic signatures or patterns. We know that that we can see sort of how to gauge those. But I'm not.
Sika, I hate to do this, but I've got to take a break. These are hard breaks, and I wish I could prolong them. But if I do that, my producer, who's already bald, it's either he'd sprout hair or lose more skin. I'm not sure about that yet. But please stand by. And Exonation, our guest this hour is Sika Groves. Her website is halfpennydreadfuls.com. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and you're listening to the X Zone right here on your hometown radio, Classic 1220. We'll be back. Don't go away.
Where will Dubai take you now?
To see where Dubai takes you now, visit DubaiPresents.com.
Wait until your vacation to make a splash. Limit the amount of liquids you pack in your carry-on when you hop on a flight. Use travel containers of 100 milliliters or less. Get more tips to fly through security screening at catset.ca.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I'm Rob McConnell. Our guest tonight is Sika Groves, and her website is halfpennydreadfuls.com. Okay, before I had to interrupt you because we had to go to that break, we were talking, I asked you the question, why don't more members of the scientific community just jump in and help solve these mysteries that have plagued us for so many years?
Right.
Yeah, do you
and
think...
again, it is a very particular field of, science. So even as a pseudoscience, it really is falls into the realm of energy and working with, energy signatures and patterns and those types of things. So people that would be interested in it would be people who work in the areas, as I mentioned before, of quantum physics or physics. And, and so again, even though we know that as a science, that is a legitimate, area, there are other people in science who still have issues with quantum physics and still have issues with the idea and concepts of, various layers of energy, perhaps, interacting with each other at the same time, yet on a different level, etc. So it becomes quite convoluted or complicated. So it's tough, right? Paranormal is looked at as a pseudoscience. And, what does pseudoscience mean? I mean, para just means something out of the ordinary, right? And then normal is, well, normal. What is normal? It's a setting on the dryer in my world.
Yeah.
But, it's tough. I mean, I think that we're starting to see perhaps more acceptance overall and understanding that, people like myself are not unique in this world. I really believe that everybody is born with this ability. It's not something that is special to any particular person. I think that what happens is somewhere along the way, we're told to repress it or shut it off, or, we're told that it's bad. It's not something that, should be a part of who we are. But as an archaeologist and as somebody who has spent a lot of my life dealing also in the realm of anthropology and ancient societies and people, that, we just know as human beings that we have always been connected to each other, to, the nature around us, to the world around us, to what's happening. And this is just a part of how we're wired. It's just some people have turned it off.
Speaking about other sciences, how does, or let me rephrase the question. When it comes to those who practice studying the human mind, and let's go to psychologists, they don't seem to, the majority I should say, they do not seem to give any credibility to people who come to them with stories of paranormal events. And yet you would think that because these are, psychologists, that they would give the benefit of the doubt to the person who claims to have had the event. And yet they don't.
Well, and here's the thing I find is that people who study, like myself, archaeology and numerous other sciences and backgrounds that I have, you spend a lot of time with your head stuck in a book. And there's a theory, and there's a process, and there's an expectation, and you're taught all of these things, but you're not really taught how to think outside of those things, outside of the box, so to speak. And so when somebody like myself, let's just say, was to go see a psychologist and sit down and tell them some of the things that have happened to me, some of the things that I've experienced, and what I like about some of my experiences is that I have names given to me, first names, last names. I can tell you what someone looks like. I have no previous knowledge of these people ever in my life, and yet I can give you this information, and you could take that information and you could go online and you could find that person in a census, and I know that a lot of psychologists and people who work in that field might say, well, you must have Googled it at some point, or it must have been in your subconscious and it's deep in the back of your mind and you're just opening that little file and, you know, going through it and having this, you know, this cognitive or, you know, moment where you believe that you are, you know, experiencing this. And that's okay, because that's how they've been trained, right? It is a training, it is a process. Now, I know a couple of psychologists who are really actually quite open to the idea and concept of the paranormal and people's experiences.
Right.
So they've gone beyond what their training has been, and they are starting to, you know, look at what people are telling them and not just shutting them down and thinking they have a mental, you know, something wrong there. There's perhaps some, you know, form of a mental illness, or perhaps there's, you know, some kind of psychosis. The brain is incredible, and we really know very little about it. And parapsychology is something that, you know, again, is coming forward. It's not particularly old. Psychology is still pretty new in the world in terms of medicine. And, you know, again, it's not even recognized sometimes as a real medicine, right? So we have all these dynamics that come into play when we get into the world of science and how we start to break it down. I think really what it is training has a lot to do with it. If you've been trained in a very particular way, perhaps you're not going to be as open to somebody telling you that they had an encounter with a spirit, or that perhaps they saw a UFO, or, you know, anything like that, right? We tend to believe that, you know, our training is going to guide us, but sometimes it's just too rigid. And I think that this is where anybody who deals with a person's thoughts and feelings and emotions probably has to become a little bit more broad in their view and acceptance. But that's not for me to say here nor there. I'm not in that field, but I do understand, you know, where training comes into things and where knowledge and understanding and parameters are placed.
Have you found that within, let's say, the last 10 years that there are more and more reports of paranormal activity than prior to, let's say, all the TV shows that are out there about ghost hunting, haunted hospitals, and so on and so forth?
Yes and no. I think there's a lot of people who want to jump on the bandwagon. But, you know, again, I can't say that those people are not believing that they're experiencing these things either, right? Because that's the problem. We, as whatever we want to call ourselves, mediums, you know, psychics, whatever it might be, we can't really condemn another person, right?
Exactly.
You can't say, no, that's not how I perceive it, so that can't be right. And I've never believed in that. But in terms of, I think, people coming forward, I think more people feel comfortable about coming forward now because it has become pretty mainstream. Yeah. And this is how things work in our society.
Yeah, I understand that, but just going back to the psychologist or even a psychiatrist in an emergency situation in a hospital, if they don't believe you or acknowledge that something has happened, that you are not acting the norm, you have never had this issue before, and you come and tell them that, you know, you had an experience with a ghost or whatever, and if they don't believe you, doesn't that just suppress that person from ever talking about it again? Which, in my opinion, is the wrong thing to do.
Yes, and again, as I mentioned very early on there when we were chatting, this is what we do to children.
Yeah.
We tell children these very same things, that, you know, this is not a truth. This is an imagination. This is an experience, but it's not a truth. And so, yes, it does damage to people, certainly. And depending on that person and their resilience and their state of mind and how they're affected, it can really shut them down. And then they're trapped within their own mind, and that's not good. I think, in terms of who we are, people who perceive and receive, is that we need to be supportive of each other and reach out and let people know that it's okay, that if maybe that psychologist or that psychiatrist wants to, prescribe you medication or do, and it's not to say that there aren't people that do have,
issues,
right, that require this. But for the most part, I think that the majority of people who experience a spirit, a ghost, an interaction are just everyday people that, we could be brother, sister, mother, father, cousin, best friend. We just need to let them know that they're not alone out there. And if they do need to chat, there's plenty of us out there that are willing to listen to them.
Years ago, I had a psychiatrist on, and he said there was no place in science for the paranormal. And he just went on for about 15 minutes, and back then the segments were 20 minutes instead of 13. And I let him go, and I let him go, and I let him go, and so finally I said, well, do you go to church? Yes. Do you believe what you read in the Bible? Yes. Isn't the Bible filled with paranormal events? Yes. So you believe something that is written in the Bible by people thousands of years ago, and yet if somebody comes to you seeking your help as a doctor who claims to have a paranormal experience, you don't believe them.
Well, and to me, that's a conflict of interest anyways. Because if you're a person of science, then religion, it's one of those tricky things, right? Because if we go back to
I'm going to have to do it again to you, Sika, because
we'll come back.
X-Zone Nation, our guest this hour is Sika Groves. Her website is halfpennydreadfuls.com. And I'll be back on the other side of this short break as we continue here in the X-Zone from the studios and offices of You Got It, Classic 1220. And we're streamed around the world on classic1220.ca. Don't go away.
Attendez d'être à destination pour faire des vagues. Limitez la quantité de liquide dans votre bagage de cabine quand vous prenez l'avion. Utilisez des contenants de moins de 100 ml. Découvrez plus d'astuces pour franchir les contrôles de sûreté à axta.ca.
Well, maybe you should try changing your bait if the fish aren't biting on what you're using. That's just my opinion. I'm not a fisherman. I'm the guy who's here Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until midnight on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and streamed around the world on classic1220.ca. Our guest this hour is Sika Groves. Her website is halfpennydreadfuls.com. Yeah, I agree with the guest I had who was a psychiatrist and mixed, religion with his profession and, wouldn't acknowledge a patient who came to him with a problem in the paranormal. That is certainly a conflict of interest. But is that the way that it used to be, or is that the way it still is? Because a lot of people who have these experiences, the majorities are not scientists. They're everyday people who work 40, 60 hours a week to make ends meet.
Yeah, and as I was saying before break, when we go back into history and we look at an era, let's say the Renaissance period, or somewhere in that time period, where you've got people like Leonardo da Vinci, and you've got these great thinkers, these artists, these people who were creating. And we also have at that time, of course, a very heavy church presence. But science and religion were, for a lack of better terms, bedfellows in those time periods.
Mm-hmm.
And so while you were, able to understand the nature of the universe, you were also able to understand that, perhaps that universe, even though the church is saying it's created by God, people of science like Bacon and Da Vinci were conflicted by that. Even Darwin was conflicted, with his ideas of evolution and the concept of God creating man and all of that, when he was seeing very different things happening in nature, very different patterns of evolution. And so we've always had this conflict, right, of science and religion. But earlier on, it was a little less of a conflict than it has become today. And I find that when people, like you mentioned, the psychiatrist who was, going to church and believing in his, his belief system and his God, and yet can sort of not willing to be open to the concept of somebody having interaction with a spirit, to me does become a conflict of interest, because you can't really believe in one thing and yet not believe in the other, right? So it becomes a very similar situation, because, as you said, biblically, there's an awful lot of miracles that went on.
Yeah.
And the Catholic Church believes in exorcism. Well, why do they believe in exorcism? Because, if you have to exorcise the spirits or demons out of people, clearly there's something otherworldly going on out there. So it does become a conundrum. I generally try to stay away from the argument, not because I'm not fully ready to argue it. I am not a follower of any faith, and I am a person of science. And yet somebody might say that I have a conflicting viewpoint if I believe in science, yet I believe in the paranormal.
I think, to me, that shows you're a very open-minded person who is willing to accept, the facts on either side. And isn't that what we're supposed to do as a human race?
Yes, and the other thing that's interesting, too, is that we have to be so egotistical to believe that we know everything that's out there in the universe. We know nothing. We know very little. We create and we manufacture our beliefs. And yet, we don't really pay attention to what's happening in nature. There's very few people that understand how nature even works, the constant play of nature, or how every object, anything, it doesn't matter what it is within our universe, has an energy signature or a pattern that can be recognized if we pay attention to it. So what's to say that as human beings, we're walking around, we're giant batteries, essentially, with flesh, that, when we are created, there's a time where there's two things that happen. There's something known as the God spark. And I mean, that's the name given to it. I don't necessarily think of it that way, but it's the moment of birth and the moment of death. There's this energy that when we are born, suddenly our bodies have this spark where, a baby is born and its eyes open for the first time in the world, and suddenly it's exposed to all of the energy signatures around it. And then when we die, our own energy goes back out into the universe. There is no denying that. This fleshy bag that we walk around in is just that. But when the body dies, the energy does not die. It just dissipates and it goes back into the universe, and it becomes a part of that universal signature.
So are we talking about the soul or consciousness at this point?
I suppose we could say this would be the soul,
okay,
right? Or if you want to tie consciousness into it, energy is a signature, and our brains are wired and they're creating a constant energetic pattern as we think. And as we know, people have their own energetic signatures. So when we do pass, that signature, soul, whatever you want to call it, now becomes free into the universe, and it's out there moving around. So, it becomes a part of everything that's going on. Now, can we prove this? Again, this is one of those weird pseudoscience moments where, quantum physics, all of those things start to come into play. It's tough to it's tough to try to explain it without sounding like you're slightly crazy.
Oh no, make yourself at home. This is the X Zone. Believe me. Would this explain the possibility of reincarnation?
And there's something to reincarnation. Yes, I don't technically believe in reincarnation per se, but I do understand that that energy signature could find a new host. So perhaps, yes, if you want to look at it in that way. Why do we have this thought of reincarnation, right? Where did it come from? Why do we feel like this happens? I mean, these are all questions that, for the millions of years that hominids have been walking around on this planet, clearly some understood much deeper the way that nature worked and how things happened.
Is it possible that the reason why certain people believe that reincarnation is real is because they don't want to accept the finality of death? From the moment you're conceived is the moment you start to die.
Of course. And, that's a scary thought to a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people, and again, this is why religion is so highly popular, because it's really giving you that, that so-called key to the afterlife, and so as human beings, it consumes a lot of our thinking and our thought. Death is something that we are constantly confronted with, and so a lot of people have fear of death. And so yes, some of these reasonings could be why we hope for reincarnation. Are we going to come back as somebody else, or ourselves within somebody else's body? These are all questions that, again, until we actually pass into that realm, we can't answer in this realm.
What is your opinion about past life regression and people who, under hypnosis, reveal facts about a past life that can be authenticated?
So here's something really interesting about that, and I'm kind of glad you asked me that question. I really don't believe in past lives. What I do believe in is regressive signature information imprinted on DNA. So what does that mean? That means that somewhere in that family tree of all of us, and, they're very vast, we have a relative who experienced that situation, that experience, whatever it might be, and that is imprinted in the DNA that is then passed down through the generations to people, and they are literally seeing memories of their extended family. That is kind of what I feel like has some truth to it. I've done a lot of dabbling in DNA studies and talking to a lot of people who are very learned in it. And we really, there seems to be a lot of energy signatures within DNA that could possibly be retained. I mean, much like, artistic ability, or, having a great mind for mathematics, or any of these things. I mean, if we search in our family trees, we're going to find other relations who have these qualities, these gifts, these abilities. And so, we're not just born boop, like Mozart, perfect example, right? He was honed as a musician by his father, who was a musician, whose father was a musician. So genetically, that is already in the DNA, right? So
right.
I kind of like that idea. I don't know that I would at this point run with it and say it's a thing, but it makes a lot of sense to me. And I had an experience. Actually, I had a recurring dream for many years.
What we're going to do is we're going to do a bit of a cliffhanger here. I have to take my final break, and when we come back, I'd love to hear your dream, because I love talking about dreams. One of my favorite subjects. Exonation, our guest this hour is Sika Groves, and her website is halfpennydreadfuls.com. I'll be back on the other side of this very short break as we wrap up this hour and tonight's show here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, on Classic 1220 and streaming around the world on classic1220.ca. I'm Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
Now when you're feeling low and the fish won't bite,
Sika Groves is our special guest this hour. Exonation, her website is www.halfpennydreadfuls.com. Sika, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. Great talking to you. But let's get back to that dream you were going to tell us about.
Right. So dreams, another interesting realm of mystery. This that I had, we're kind of talking about this past life regression, or in my case, the idea where I like the concept or the new emerging, science around encoding these things being encoded in our DNA. So this dream that I had, it started when I was about 10 years old, and just, to get it in a little tight box here, so because we're time constrained. Essentially, I would find myself in what appeared to be a sort of apartment, but not in a modern apartment. Think of an apartment in an old castle or a Renaissance, style manor house. This apartment where I had a large, lovely room with a sitting area, a big bed, windows I could see out. I could see the river down below. And I would wake up, and I was an older woman, probably in my late 30s, and I was in this Renaissance time period. And I would open this big door, and I would walk down this hallway. And I would walk down this hallway, and I would get to the end of this hallway, and it would make a sharp right. Right in front of me was a fish tank, very strange, in the wall of this castle. So this dream would happen, I don't know how often, but enough that I became very familiar with every aspect of it. I could describe the room very vividly, the colors, the smells, the sounds, all of those things. So many, many years later, I was still having this dream, and I was in probably my early 40s, I guess, and I had the dream again, and I was like thinking, I should just write all this down. So I started writing everything down. And then I happened to come across this book that someone had gifted me, and I thought, I'll read this book. It didn't have anything to do with the dream, But, the book and the dream kind of go hand in hand. I started to read this book about Mary Queen of Scots. And Mary Queen of Scots had this experience where she was locked away by her cousin Elizabeth I in this room, in this apartment, for a good portion of the latter part of her life before she was beheaded. And part of the story and part of my dream was that when I saw this fish tank, I was suddenly down on the river in a boat, but now I was dressed like a man and I was leaving in this boat. So I'm reading this biography of sorts of Mary Queen of Scots. And here is this experience where she was locked in this apartment, and the fish tank had nothing really to do with the whole concept of it. I think that was just a trigger for me to realize that the two parts of the dream were actually the same dream. But there's not enough time to really get into that portion of it. But anyways, reading this book, the story was Mary tried to escape. She dressed as a man. She got in this boat. They tried to row her away from where she was being held. She got caught. She was returned. I found out, now I'd already known this for a number of years, that my grandfather's side of the family are Stuarts, and his mother was a Stuart. And I wondered when I was told this, Mary is something like my 12th great grandmother. Was that dream that I had something that was encoded in my DNA that was reliving her experience? And the fish tank just happened to be something that I identified with as a child, because we had a fish tank in the living room of our house. And that was the connection that kept me grounded to my own existence while being, in this dream world, experiencing something my ancestor had gone through. As a 10-year-old, I didn't.
But that the embeddedness of these events in the DNA takes, is quite possible. Alrighty, it seems that my producer is telling me that he thinks we lost our guest. Let's see if she is around. Are you with us, Sika? No, it seems that Sika is not with us, but Craig is going to keep trying to contact her, and as soon as we can get her back on, we will. But for those of you who are just joining us, our guest this hour is Sika Groves. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Archaeology and is a historian who specializes in the macabre. Tell me, Exonation, are you skeptics or are you believers? Do you believe in reincarnation? Now, we've had a number of guests on the show recently who present a very powerful case for reincarnation. And, we've just got to take a look at things and try to better understand what is in this world around us, what is real, and what we bring with us from the past in a DNA, like Sika was saying. What she was saying makes sense. In fact, we had a scientist on with us a couple of weeks ago, as you will remember, who was talking about the very same thing, that the DNA is like, like a computer chip, all right? From generation to generation to generation, experiences are added into the DNA that is passed on. It makes perfect sense. It really does. So this is one thing. I would like you to let me know, X-Zone Nation, how you feel about that. Do you think it's possible that past life regression opens up the key to the DNA sequencing or the DNA experiences of our past relatives? And this is what the past life regression is really about. It has nothing to do with what you yourself have gone through. But these are recalls or data that is being retrieved and played back and being exposed and explained that we believe that we have experienced. I hope I've I hope that you can understand and follow what I was trying to get across. So that's one thing. Now, another thing that we've been talking about a lot here is out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences. And when it comes to near-death experiences, over the years, I've had a number of medical doctors who have worked in emergency operating situations where they have talked to the person after, and we have talked to the person who has had the experience, and the information that they are getting back is something that is just astronomical, that just cannot be explained, except that they actually were out of their body and that they actually did see things that they could only see if they were there looking down. So there's another thing. Our near-death experience is real. I remember having Dr. Janice Amatuzio on, who herself was a doctor, who had a near-death experience. So when you have a doctor who is coming out publicly, she wrote a wonderful book about it, saying, listen, I know that near-death experiences are real because, you know what? I had one. I remember what it was like. I can recall everything about it, and I did. Everything that she talked about was confirmed by the operation room staff, by the surgeon. So how can we just kind of close our eyes and say, well, no, that's not real, or close our minds and say, no, that's not real? We really can't. We have to give more investigations into the possibility that what we may not experience can and is being experienced by other people. The same thing goes for ghosts. I may not see a ghost. I've never seen a ghost. I've wanted to see a ghost. And yet there are so many people, many of them are listeners here on the X-Zone, who have had these experiences, who have had experiences where they've been touched by a ghost, where they've communicated with these spirits. You've got the paranormal investigators who get EVPs. They ask a question, give a pause on the recording device, then ask another question. Now, the reply from the other side or the spirit is not audible at the time of the recording. But when they go back and they replay the recording, they have what they claim are the answers from the other side. People who have had near-death experiences and who have gone to the other side claim that they have been met by people in their own family who have passed before them, pets that have passed before them. They have the tunnel of life review. They are met sometimes by religious figures such as Jesus and other religious philosophical famous people that are read about and are talked about. And the people who have the near-death experience are told, no, it's not your time yet. You have to go back. There's unfinished business. Once again, is it possible? Sure, it's possible. Everything is possible. And I believe that the answer to a lot of these questions is with the ability and the power of belief. Because the power of belief is the strongest power in the universe, in my opinion. If you believe that you can move a mountain, you'll find a way to do it. If you believe that you will be successful in school and go to college, university, and get degrees up the yin-yang, you will, because you believe it. If you believe you are going to be rich, you will believe it, and it will happen. The power lies within you. Each and every one of you listening tonight to the X-Zone on Classic 1220 has the ability to make your dreams come true. And don't forget this, X-Zone Nation. The difference between a dream and a reality is just making it happen. You have the power. You have the ability. It's up to you to make your dreams come true, or to follow any of your wishes. You have that power. I've seen it happen, and I'm sure each and every one of you have the ability to make wonderful things happen to you. I'll be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock as once again we cross the airwaves here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada on Classic 1220. So until tomorrow night, good night, everyone.